Welcome to my channel. I hope you find this tale engaging. Let's get started. I was gazing at the laptop screen, my jaw tight, as the GPS tracker flashed, showing Lydia's whereabouts at a certain Trini cafe downtown. It was 9 p.m. on a Tuesday. She should have been at her yoga session. Damn it, Lydia, I whispered, massaging my forehead. I had been sensing something amiss for weeks: her frequent late-night sessions, incessant texting, and increasing emotional withdrawal. Yet, witnessing tangible evidence twisted my gut. My phone vibrated, a message from Lydia: class running late. Don't wait up. I almost chuckled at the obvious deception. Instead, I seized my keys and left, determined to uncover what my beloved spouse was truly engaging in. The cafe was poorly lit, striving excessively to appear trendy. I parked opposite and observed. There she was, seated at an outdoor table, chuckling, her hand occasionally brushing the arm of a stranger I had never encountered before. My fingers clenched the steering wheel until my knuckles paled. I was tempted to confront them right there, but no, I required further details before acting. I captured several photos with my mobile, then returned home, my thoughts swirling. Who was he? How long had this been happening? Most crucially, what was I to do? Back at our excessively large residence, which I had labored diligently to afford, I poured a scotch and settled into my home office, ready to investigate. It didn't take long to identify him online: Ethan Blackwood, 32, a well-known local yoga teacher with an Instagram profile replete with bare-chested photos and motivational sayings. Ridiculous. I was still perusing his social media when I heard Lydia's key in the lock. Showtime, I murmured. Adrian, are you still awake? She called as I emerged from the office, scotch in hand. Hey on, how was yoga? She hesitated briefly before regaining her poise. Oh great, really challenging tonight. I bet, I replied, keeping my tone even. You must be worn out after such strenuous activity. Lydia's gaze sharpened slightly. What's that supposed to mean? I shrugged, taking a sip of scotch. Nothing, just chatting. She eyed me for a moment, then seemed to soften. Well, I am exhausted. I'm going to take a shower and head to bed. Sweet dreams, I said, watching her depart. Once I heard the shower running, I returned to my investigation. I needed undeniable proof, something that would stand up in court, because, undoubtedly, I was not about to let Lydia take half of everything I had amassed. The following morning, I contacted Frank Sutherland, a highly recommended private investigator, and we met at a plain diner, away from curious eyes. Frank, a seasoned man in his 50s with keen eyesight, listened as I described my situation. Mr. Hawthorne, he began, you seek proof of your wife's unfaithfulness. Exactly, I responded. Solid proof, photos, video, whatever it takes. He nodded slowly. And what do you intend to do with this evidence once obtained? I met his look unwaveringly. Whatever I must to safeguard myself and my possessions. A hint of a smile flickered across Frank's face. Understood. I'll start immediately, but be warned, Mr. Hawthorne, these probes sometimes reveal surprises. I'm ready for anything, I asserted confidently. Just get me what I need. As I left the diner, my phone vibrated with a message from my best friend and business partner. Victor drinks tonight? I hesitated, then replied, sure, the usual spot at 8. I needed to discuss everything, and if there was anyone I could confide in, it was Victor. We had endured too much together for any doubts now. When I arrived at the bar, it was bustling, but I spotted Victor at our customary spot in the back. He signaled me over, 2 whiskeys already served. You look like hell, he remarked as I took my seat. I laughed without humor. Feel like it too, I confessed, taking a deep gulp of whiskey, savoring the sting. It's Lydia, Victor said, his expression turning grave. What's happening? I relayed everything, my doubts, tailing Lydia to the cafe, employing the private investigator. He listened attentively, his forehead creased with worry. Jesus, Adrian, he remarked when I finished. I'm truly sorry. What are you planning to do? I'm not sure yet, I confessed, but I'm not going to let her get away with this. I've worked way too hard to let her and her lover take everything I'm worth, I continued. Victor nodded slowly, cautioning, just be careful, okay? Don't act impulsively. Maybe there's a reason for all this. A reason, I interjected, my anger surging. For what? For her deceiving me, for sneaking around behind my back. He raised his hands soothingly. I'm just suggesting you wait until you have all the evidence before making any major decisions. You have a lot at stake, Adrian. I inhaled deeply, trying to quell my agitation. You're right. I know, I can't fathom why she'd do this after all we've endured together, I expressed. Victor reached out, his hand on my shoulder. Whatever occurs, I'm here for you. You understand that, right? I managed a faint smile. Yeah, I appreciate it, thanks. As I drove home that night, Victor's advice resonated with me: be cautious, avoid hasty actions. Yet, with every new lie from Lydia, I felt my restraint dwindling. Something was bound to break soon. The following week was a haze of suspicion and barely restrained fury. I mechanically went about my job, but my thoughts constantly wandered to Lydia's deceit. Frank provided regular updates, more yoga classes that were just secretive rendezvous at secluded cafes and parks. Eventually, he delivered the news I had been waiting for. Got what you need. Meet me at the diner. I excused myself from work early and rushed to meet Frank. He was seated in a corner booth, a thick manila envelope laid out before him. It's all here, he stated bluntly as I sat down. Photos, videos, phone records. Lydia had been involved with Ethan for at least 3 months. I reached for the envelope, my hands trembling, but Frank paused, holding it back. Are you sure you want to see this? He asked, his look solemn. Once you do, there's no turning back. I met his gaze firmly. I'm sure. He nodded and handed it over. I opened the envelope, bracing myself for what I was about to see. The first photo struck me hard: Lydia and Ethan in a tight embrace outside a nondescript motel. I flipped through the rest swiftly, each image burning itself into my memory: them laughing during dinner, strolling hand in hand through the park, kissing in his car. There's video too, Frank mentioned quietly. I shook my head, pushing everything back into the envelope. This is sufficient. I pulled out my checkbook. Thank you for your work, Mr. Sutherland. I assume this covers everything. He glanced at the amount and nodded. More than. Are you sure you don't need anything else? He inquired as I stood. No, I replied. I've got what I need. I drove home in a daze, my mind whirling. Now that I had the evidence, what was I going to do with it? Confront Lydia? Consult a divorce attorney? I needed time to strategize my next move carefully. But as I pulled into our driveway and saw Lydia's car already there, something inside me snapped. The accumulated hurt, betrayal, and rage I had been suppressing surged forth. To hell with careful planning, it was time for a confrontation. I barged into the house to find Lydia in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner. She looked up with a smile that quickly vanished when she saw my face. Adrian, what's wrong? I laughed bitterly. What's wrong? Why don't you tell me, Lydia? How was yoga tonight? She hesitated slightly but maintained her composure. It was fine. Why are you? Lydia began, but I interrupted her, slamming the envelope down on the counter. I know everything about Ethan, about all of it, I declared, my voice fierce. Lydia's eyes widened in shock, then narrowed. You've been spying on me, she accused. Absolutely, I have, I retorted, and it's fortunate I did, or I'd still be oblivious. About my wife having an affair with her yoga instructor behind my back, I continued. It's not like that, Lydia protested, her voice escalating. You don't understand. Oh, I understand just fine, I interrupted her sharply. I understand that while I've been toiling away to provide this life for us, you've been wasting it on some self-absorbed, attractive fool. Lydia's expression turned stern. Maybe if you devoted as much attention to me as you do your precious business, I wouldn't have needed to find someone else. I staggered back as if she had struck me. So this is my fault. You're blaming me for your choice to cheat. I'm not blaming you, she said, her voice gentler. I'm just pointing out we've been growing apart for a long time, Adrian. Ethan, he makes me feel vital again. I shook my head, repulsed. Save your excuses. I don't want to hear them. I want you out of this house tonight. Lydia's eyes widened in alarm. Adrian, no, we can resolve this. We could try counseling, there's nothing to resolve, I interrupted icily. We're finished. I'll have the divorce papers prepared in the morning. You can't just kick me out, she objected. This is my home too. I have rights, I laughed without mirth. Rights? You forfeited any rights you had the moment you decided to be unfaithful. You want rights? Talk to my lawyer. I turned to leave, but Lydia grabbed my arm. Adrian, please. I'm sorry. It was a mistake. I love you. I pulled away from her grasp. Don't you dare say you love me. If you did, you never would have done this. Tears formed in Lydia's eyes. What about everything we've built together? Are you really prepared to discard it all? I gazed at her for a prolonged moment, seeing not the woman I had loved for years, but a stranger, a liar, a betrayer. You discarded it, I said softly, not me. Now leave. I walked away, ignoring her cries and pleas. I locked myself in my office, listening as she moved around the house, collecting some belongings. Finally, I heard the front door open and close. Only then did I allow myself to break down, pouring another scotch with trembling hands. It was over. My marriage, the life I thought I had, all built on deception. But as the initial shock subsided, another feeling emerged: determination. Lydia might have deceived me, but I was resolved not to let her ruin everything I had worked for. I took out my phone and called Victor. Hey, I said when he picked up, I need your help. It's time to go to war. The next morning, I woke early and headed directly to the office of Evelyn Green, one of the top divorce lawyers in the city. I had called in every favor I had to secure an emergency appointment. Evelyn was a sharp-featured woman in her 50s, known for her relentless approach in court. Perfect. Mr. Hawthorne, she greeted as I entered her office. I understand you require my services, I nodded, sitting across from her desk. My wife has been unfaithful. I want a divorce, and I'm determined to ensure she doesn't strip me of everything I'm worth. Evelyn's eyebrows lifted slightly. I see. Do you have evidence of this affair? I placed Frank's envelope on her desk. It's all in there: photos, videos, phone records, everything. She opened the envelope, examining its contents with a practiced eye. This is excellent, she murmured. It certainly strengthens our case. So what's the next step? I inquired. Evelyn leaned back in her chair, her gaze steely. Now, Mr. Hawthorne, we prepare for battle. Your wife will contest this, no doubt. She'll portray herself as the victim, claim emotional neglect, possibly even allege abuse. I started to protest, but she raised her hand. I'm not saying it's true. I'm just warning you it's what she might claim. We need to be prepared for anything. I nodded slowly. Whatever it takes. I'm not letting her take even a dime more than she is entitled to, I declared. A subtle, cunning smile crossed Evelyn's face. I was hoping you'd say that. Now, let's discuss our strategy. For the next 2 hours, we meticulously reviewed every aspect of my marriage, my finances, and the evidence against Lydia. Evelyn was comprehensive, examining every possible angle. One last thing. She stated as our meeting concluded, I need you to start documenting everything, every interaction with your wife, every expenditure, every phone call, anything that might be pertinent to the case. Understood, I responded, standing up. Thanks for your assistance, Miss Green, she nodded. We'll be in touch soon. And Mr. Hawthorne, try to stay composed. I know it's tough, but any misstep now could be used against us in court. I left Evelyn's office feeling both depleted and invigorated, aware of the daunting reality of the legal battle ahead, yet prepared to confront it. As I drove back to the office, my phone rang. Victor, I answered. Hey, he replied. What's up? Just checking in, he said. How did it go with the lawyer? I briefed him on the meeting and Evelyn's cautions about the impending challenges. Victor whistled softly. Sounds like things are going to get messy. Are you sure you're ready for this? I don't have a choice, I retorted. Lydia made her choice. Now she can live with it. There was a brief silence on the line. Listen, Adrian, I know you're upset, but are you sure this is the right approach? Maybe if you both cooled off, talked things through. There's nothing to talk about, I interrupted sharply. She cheated, Victor. She lied to my face for months. I'm done, he sighed. All right, man. I just hate to see it end like this, but I've got your back, no matter what. I know, I acknowledged, my voice softening slightly. Thanks. I'm going to need all the support I can get. As I hung up, a flicker of doubt crossed my mind. Was I acting too hastily, too severely? But then I remembered the photographs, Lydia's deceptions, the look on her face when I confronted her. No, this was the only path forward. I arrived at the office, trying to concentrate on work, but my thoughts continually drifted. I had built this company from scratch, invested everything into it. The notion of Lydia claiming any part of it infuriated me. Around noon, my assistant peeked into the office. Mr. Hawthorne, your wife is here to see you, she announced. I tensed, then forced myself to relax. Send her in. Lydia entered, looking pale and distraught, a stark contrast to her usually impeccable appearance. Adrian, she began quietly, we need to talk. I leaned back in my chair, my expression unchanging. I think we said everything that needed to be said last night. She shook her head, stepping closer. No, please just hear me out. What I did was a terrible mistake, I know that, but our marriage doesn't have to end because of one foolish decision. I laughed bitterly. One foolish decision, Lydia? You've been lying to me for months, sneaking around, making me look foolish. That's not one decision. That's a calculated betrayal, I know, she admitted, tears appearing in her eyes. And I'm so sorry, Adrian. Please, can we just talk about this? I made a horrible mistake, but I still love you. I stared at her, feeling nothing but stark disdain. Love? You don't know the meaning of the word. Get out of my office, Lydia. We'll communicate through our lawyers from now on, Adrian. Please, she started. But I cut her off, my voice firm. Now Lydia flinched, then turned and hurried out of the office. I sat back, taking deep breaths to compose myself. I couldn't let her affect me. I had to stay focused, remain strong. My phone buzzed. A message from Frank. Got more info. Meet tonight, I replied swiftly. 8 p.m., the usual place. The rest of the day crawled by. I immersed myself in work, attempting to distract from the constant pain in my heart. By the time I left the office, I was drained yet resolute. Frank was already seated at our usual spot in the back of the dimly lit tavern. He nodded as I joined him. What have you discovered? I inquired, getting straight to the point. Frank leaned in, speaking softly. It's graver than we anticipated, Adrian. Your wife and this Ethan fellow, they're concocting something major. My stomach churned. What do you mean? I asked anxiously. I've been tracking their communications, Frank explained. They're planning to frame you perhaps for domestic abuse or something that would devastate you both socially and financially. I clenched my fists under the table, outraged. Those scoundrels. Do you have evidence? Frank nodded, pushing a USB drive across the table. It's all here: texts, emails, recorded conversations. They've become careless, overconfident. They don't think you suspect a thing. I pocketed the drive, my thoughts racing. Thanks, Frank. Keep on it. I want to be informed of their every move. As I left the bar, I resolved it was time to take the offensive. Lydia and her paramour thought they could ruin me. They underestimated who they were dealing with. The next day, I called Evelyn. I need to expedite things, I told her. They're orchestrating something significant. Understood, she responded sharply. I'll have the divorce papers prepared today. Meanwhile, make sure to document everything, and Adrian, be cautious. Don't provide them any fodder to use against you. I spent the following days on high alert, every interaction with Lydia meticulously recorded. I observed her attempts to incite me, to push me into reacting in a way she could exploit, but I stayed composed, detached. It all escalated on a Friday evening. I returned home late from work to discover Lydia and Ethan in our living room. Seeing them together in my space ignited my fury. What the hell is this? I demanded. Lydia stood, feigning surprise. Adrian, I didn't expect you back so early. Ethan, just save it, I interrupted her. I'm fully aware of what's happening here. Ethan rose, positioning himself slightly before Lydia. Look, man, no need for this to escalate. We're all mature here, I scoffed bitterly. Mature? Is that what you call deceiving behind my back, plotting to frame me? Lydia acted shocked. Frame you, Adrian? What are you implying? Don't feign ignorance, I snapped. I know all about the affair, your plot to accuse me of abuse. Did you think I was that naive? Ethan's expression hardened. You have no idea what you're talking about. Oh, I think I do, I retorted, pulling out my phone. In fact, I have proof. Want to listen? I played a recording of Lydia and Ethan discussing their scheme. Lydia turned ashen, while Ethan's face reddened with anger. You've been spying on us, Lydia shrieked. Indeed, I have, I replied coldly. And it's fortunate I did. Now, both of you, leave my house before I call the police. Ethan took Lydia by the arm. Let's go. This isn't over, Hawthorne. I watched them depart, a mix of fury and satisfaction within me. It wasn't over, not by a long shot, but I had triumphed in this encounter. The subsequent weeks were filled with legal consultations and tactical maneuvers. Evelyn proved invaluable, systematically thwarting every attempt by Lydia and Ethan to undermine me or gain an advantage. I devoted myself to my business, determined not to let this turmoil affect my enterprise. Yet it was challenging, especially with Victor persistently suggesting I reconcile with Lydia. Adrian, he urged one evening over drinks, maybe if you just talked to her, worked things out. I interrupted him sharply. There's nothing to resolve, Victor. She chose her path. Now she must accept the repercussions. Victor sighed, his expression troubled. I just hate seeing you this way, man. You're not sleeping, barely eating. Is it really worth it? I eyed him, a hint of suspicion arising. Why was he so eager for me to reconcile with Lydia? It's worth everything, I asserted firmly. I won't let them win. I won't let them take what I've built. As I left the bar that night, unease lingered. There was more happening than I knew. I needed to be vigilant. I couldn't trust anyone, not even my oldest friend. The final showdown was imminent. A week later, Lydia, feeling desperate and cornered, filed a police report accusing me of domestic abuse. She arrived at the station with bruises, concocting a story of years of control and violence. However, I was prepared. I had recordings of every interaction we'd had since I learned of the affair, as well as footage from hidden cameras in our home that showed Lydia's efforts to provoke me and my composed reactions. The police, faced with overwhelming evidence of Lydia's deceit, had no option but to dismiss the investigation. Lydia was charged with filing a false report. As I left the police station, I felt a burden lift from my shoulders. It was over. I had prevailed. But as I drove home, a new resolve took hold. Winning was not sufficient. Lydia, Ethan, and anyone else complicit in their plot needed to face consequences, and I was determined to ensure they would, no matter the cost. The following morning, I strode into my office with renewed purpose. My assistant, Sarah, hurried after me with a stack of papers in her hands. Mr. Hawthorne, the divorce papers are prepared for your signature, she announced, placing them on my desk. I picked up a pen, a grin on my face. Perfect timing, Sarah. Let's finalize this. As I signed my name, I felt a sense of closure. This was the culmination of my marriage, the onset of my retaliation. Have these delivered to Lydia immediately, I instructed Sarah, and get Evelyn on the phone. We need to act swiftly. Within an hour, Evelyn was sitting across from me, her expression as resolute as mine. We've got them cornered, Adrian, she stated. Now it's time to deliver the decisive blow. What's our next step? I leaned forward, my voice stern. I want to strike them where it will hurt the most: their finances, their reputations, everything. Evelyn nodded, her eyes gleaming with a predatory light. Leave it to me. By the time we're finished, they won't know what hit them. As Evelyn departed, my phone rang. It was Frank. Adrian, we've got a problem, he said urgently. Your wife and that yoga instructor are attempting to access your business accounts. I felt a surge of anger, quickly replaced by calculated resolve. Let them try, Frank. In fact, make it easier for them. I've got a plan. Over the following days, I orchestrated my strategy with the help of my I-team. We created a series of decoy accounts, making them appear as though they contained substantial funds. Then we waited. It didn't take long. Late one night, I received an alert on my phone. Someone was attempting to transfer a large sum from one of the decoy accounts. I smiled, picking up the phone to call Evelyn. We've caught them, I declared. Time to spring the trap. The next morning, I walked into a conference room where Lydia and Ethan were seated, flanked by their lawyers. Evelyn stood beside me, a stack of documents in her hands. What's this about? Adrian, Lydia demanded. We're in the middle of divorce proceedings. You can't just summon us here like, oh, I think you know exactly what this is about, I interrupted her coldly. Your recent attempt to embezzle from my company last night. Ethan paled while Lydia's eyes widened in panic. I don't know what you're talking about, she stammered. I nodded to Evelyn, who began distributing documents. These are records of your attempted transfer, I explained, along with a history of your unauthorized access to company accounts. Care to explain? Their lawyers appeared dismayed, hastily scanning the documents. Lydia and Ethan exchanged nervous looks. This is all a misunderstanding, Ethan started, but I raised my hand to stop him. Save it, I snapped. Here's what's going to happen, Lydia. You're going to sign these papers, agreeing to a divorce settlement that leaves you with nothing. Ethan, you're going to vanish. If either of you tries to contest this, I'll press charges for attempted embezzlement. Are we clear? Lydia burst into tears, while Ethan looked as though he might be ill. Their lawyers huddled together, whispering urgently. Finally, Lydia's lawyer spoke up. We need time to review these documents. You have 1 hour, I said firmly. I suggest you use it wisely. As they filed out of the room, I turned to Evelyn. Make sure everything's watertight. I want this wrapped up by the end of the day. Evelyn nodded, a contented smile gracing her face. Don't worry, Adrian. They don't stand a chance. True to my assurance, by that evening, the divorce was finalized. Lydia was left with nothing but the clothes on her back, while Ethan slinked away, his reputation in ruins. I should have felt victorious, yet I felt hollow, empty. Something was still amiss. That sensation was confirmed the next day when Frank called. Adrian, you're not going to believe this, he said, his tone tense. I've discovered something significant. It's about Victor. My stomach sank. What about him? He's been involved from the start, Frank revealed. He's been aiding Lydia and Ethan, and there's more. He's been siphoning funds from your company for years. The world seemed to sway. Victor, my oldest friend, my business partner, I struggled to accept it. Yet, as Frank presented the evidence, a cold fury grew within me. The betrayal cut deeper than any harm Lydia had inflicted. What do you want to do? Frank inquired. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. Arrange a meeting, me, Victor, and the board. Don't disclose the reason. I want to see his reaction when I confront him the next day. I sat at the head of the conference table, observing as the board members assembled. Victor entered last, his expression one of confusion. Adrian, what is this about? He asked as he settled into his chair. I rose slowly, my gaze fixed on Victor. It's about trust, Victor. Loyalty, qualities I believed you valued. Victor's brow furrowed. What are you implying? I gestured to my assistant, who began distributing folders to each board member. These documents reveal years of embezzlement from our company funds, transferred to offshore accounts. Guess whose name is on those accounts? Victor, his face paled as he leafed through the folder. Adrian, I can explain. Save it, I interrupted sharply. I trusted you, Victor. You were like a brother to me, and all this while, you've been betraying me, colluding with my wife to ruin me. The board members murmured in shock, glaring at Victor with a mix of anger and disdain. Victor stood, desperation in his eyes. You don't understand, Adrian. I had no choice. Lydia, save it, I repeated, my voice frosty. You're finished here, Victor. The board will vote on your removal immediately, and then you'll hear from my lawyer. Security escorted a protesting Victor from the room. I addressed the board. I apologize for this disturbance. Rest assured, measures are being taken to recuperate the stolen funds and to prevent such incidents in the future. The meeting adjourned, and I retreated to my office, feeling utterly drained. The betrayal seemed unending. Was there anyone I could trust? My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. We need to talk about Lydia, Victor, and the truth you don't yet know. I stared at the message, a mix of curiosity and exhaustion overwhelming me. Who could this be, and what truth were they referring to? As I contemplated my next steps, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. The game had changed, the stakes were higher, but I was prepared. Whatever came next, I would confront it head-on, because one thing had become evident in this world full of deception and betrayal. The only person I could truly depend on was myself. I sat in my office, pondering the message on my phone. A meeting with Noah Winter, the journalist who had been posing as Ethan, was scheduled for noon. My mind raced with possibilities. What new revelations awaited me? At precisely 12, my assistant introduced a man I barely recognized. Gone was the carefully cultivated look of a yoga instructor, replaced by a sharp-eyed professional in a crisp suit. Mr. Hawthorne, Noah said, extending his hand. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me. I grasped his hand firmly. Let's skip the formalities, Mr. Winter. You mentioned you had information for me. Noah nodded, taking a seat opposite me. I've been investigating corruption and unfaithfulness among the city's elite for months. Your wife and Victor were just the beginning, and you thought posing as her paramour was the best way to gather information. I inquired, my tone questioning. It wasn't my initial choice, Noah conceded, but it turned out to be effective. I've unearthed a network of deceit that extends well beyond your personal troubles. I leaned back in my chair. I'm listening. Noah produced a thick file. I'm prepared to offer you exclusive access to my findings. In return, I seek your protection from any potential backlash. Why me? I asked, skepticism edging my voice. Because you're the aggrieved party here, Mr. Hawthorne, and because you possess the resources and influence to ensure this story is told. I mulled over his proposal for a moment. On one condition, that the article focuses mainly on Lydia and Victor's deceit. The rest can serve as context. Noah hesitated, then nodded. Agreed. We spent several hours discussing the details. By the time Noah departed, I had a comprehensive understanding of the extent of corruption in our social network, and I knew precisely how to utilize this information. The following morning, I convened an emergency board meeting. As the members entered, their confusion was palpable. "Gentlemen," I began once everyone was seated, "I've summoned you because we face a situation that demands immediate attention." I outlined the basics of Noah's investigation, observing as shock and disbelief washed over the room. "Mr. Hawthorne," one of the board members blurted, "are you implying that our company has been inadvertently involved in these activities?" I affirmed with a nod, "Through Victor's actions, yes. But we have an opportunity, a chance to take the initiative with this story and present ourselves as victims rather than culprits." Another board member leaned in. "What do you suggest?" "Full transparency," I declared. "We collaborate fully with the investigation, open our books, clean house, and seize this opportunity to rebrand ourselves as a paragon of corporate integrity." The room burst into lively debate. I allowed the discussions to continue for a few minutes before raising my hand for silence. "I understand your concerns," I assured them, "but believe me, this is our best course of action. The story will emerge regardless of our cooperation. This way, we shape the narrative." Gradually, one by one, the board members signaled their agreement. By the end of the meeting, we had formulated a strategy. The ensuing weeks were bustling with activity. We engaged an independent auditing firm to meticulously review our accounts. Any staff remotely linked to Victor's schemes was dismissed. We introduced new policies for transparency and ethical conduct, and throughout it all, I collaborated closely with Noah to craft the story that would soon shake the city to its core. On the day the article was released, I prepared for the fallout. However, my concerns were unfounded. The public response was overwhelmingly positive. My phone was inundated with calls from clients and business partners, all praising our handling of the situation. Our stock price, which had initially dipped, recovered and soared higher than before. As for Lydia and Victor, the backlash was quick and unforgiving. Overnight, they became outcasts, ostracized by the very social groups they had once influenced. I was in my office reviewing the latest surge of positive press coverage when my assistant buzzed me. "Mr. Hawthorne, there's a woman here to see you. She claims she's your sister." I froze. "Isabella?" I hadn't seen or spoken to her in years. "Send her in," I instructed after a brief hesitation. The door opened, and there she was, Isabella, looking older and more worn than I remembered, but unmistakably my little sister. "Hello, Adrian," she greeted, her voice cool. "It's been a while." I stood up slowly. "Isabella, what brings you here?" She stepped further into the office, her eyes scanning the signs of my success. "I saw the article. Quite a story." "Is that why you're here?" I asked, somewhat sharply. To marvel at the family scandal, Isabella's expression hardened. "I'm here because Lydia reached out to me. She's desperate, Adrian. She has nowhere else to turn." I laughed bitterly. "And you thought I'd died? What? Welcome her back with open arms." "Of course not," Isabella snapped. "I came to warn you. She's not finished, Adrian. She's plotting something." I sat back down, suddenly weary. "Let her try. I've outmaneuvered her at every turn so far." Isabella leaned in, her tone urgent. "You don't understand. I've known about her affair with Victor for months. I kept silent, hoping what I demanded. Hoping it would lead to Victor's downfall," she confessed. "I have my own grievances to settle with him." I stared at her, a fresh wave of betrayal washing over me. "You knew all this time and said nothing." Isabella looked ashamed. "I was wrong. I see that now. But Adrian, there's more to this story than you know." Just then, my phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Meeting now. Your office. It's time for the truth." I showed the message to Isabella, and her face paled. "It's Lydia. She's on her way here." "Good," I said grimly. "It's time to finish this." Within minutes, Lydia burst into my office, Victor trailing behind her. They both looked worn out and desperate. "Adrian," Lydia began, but I cut her off. "Save it," I snapped. "I don't want to hear any more of your lies." "It's not lies," Victor interjected. "There's something you need to know." Isabella stepped forward. "Let them speak, Adrian. I think we all need to hear this." I looked at the three of them, these individuals who had betrayed me profoundly. Part of me wanted to eject them, to end all of this, but another part craved answers. "Fine," I said icily. "Speak." What followed was a convoluted mess of confessions. Isabella admitted to her past affair with Victor, which had precipitated our estrangement. Lydia confessed that her initial interest in me had been purely financial, but she claimed to have genuinely fallen for me over time. Victor, more broken than ever, disclosed the full scope of his embezzlement and deceit. As they spoke, an unexpected calm settled over me. These people, whom I had once loved and trusted, had inflicted so much pain upon me. Yet, sitting here, listening to their pitiful justifications, I realized something. I was liberated, free from Lydia's manipulations, from Victor's false camaraderie, from the burden of Isabella's unspoken grudges, and from the doubts and suspicions that had haunted me for so long. As they concluded, all three awaited my response, perhaps even my forgiveness. I stood up slowly, my gaze shifting from one to another. "Is that everything?" I asked, my voice empty of emotion. Lydia stepped forward, tears in her eyes. "Adrian, please, we can start over. I know I've wronged you, but no," I interrupted firmly. "We can't start over. There is no us anymore." "Lydia, there hasn't been anything between us for a long time," I turned to Victor. "You were my best friend. I trusted you with everything, and this is how you repay that trust." Victor opened his mouth to speak, but I raised a hand to stop him. "Don't. There's nothing you can say that will make this right." Finally, I looked at Isabella. "You're my sister, and you kept all of this from me." I'm sorry," she whispered. "I thought I was protecting you." I shook my head. "You were protecting yourself, just like always." I walked to the door of my office and opened it. "I want all of you out of my office, out of my company, out of my life." "Adrian," Lydia pleaded. "Don't do this." I met her gaze steadily. "It's already done. Goodbye, Lydia." One by one, they filed out. As Isabella passed me, she paused. "What will you do now?" she asked softly. I looked at her, feeling a mix of sadness and resolve. "I'm going to live my life on my terms, without any of you in it." The door closed behind them, and for the first time in months, I felt truly at peace. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into my work with renewed vigor. The company thrived under my leadership, our reputation for integrity drawing in new clients and partners. I also started a foundation, using my wealth and influence to assist others who had been victims of betrayal and financial abuse. It felt good to turn my pain into something positive. One sunny afternoon, I found myself walking through the city park. As I strolled along the path, lost in thought, I quite literally bumped into someone. "Oh, I'm so sorry," a woman's voice said. I looked up to see a pair of kind eyes and a warm smile. "No, it was my fault," I replied, returning her smile. "I wasn't watching where I was going." We got to talking, and before I knew it, an hour had passed. Her name was Sarah, and she was refreshingly honest and down to earth. As we parted ways, I felt a glimmer of something I hadn't experienced in a long time: hope. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in ages, I was looking forward to finding out. Standing in my office later that day, looking out over the city I had helped build, a sense of peace washed over me. I had lost a lot, it was true, but I had gained something far more valuable. I had gained myself. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.